It's Cageside with John Morgan.
Welcome, everybody, back to another episode of Cageside with John Morgan. I'm your host, Eric McMahon. A lot of things we can talk about. A little slow news cycle, actually, fight-wise. There was a show this past weekend in the Apex. A lot of good regional action. But there are a bunch of headlines we can go over this episode. There's the whole Eric Nicksick and Sean Strickland controversy. Is there controversy there? Conor McGregor making waves in BKFC. John Morgan, the great John Morgan, who I'm going to intro next, had an amazing episode with Henry Cejudo that posted just this past week ahead of his UFC Seattle fight with Yadong. Go and check that out. We'll talk about that interview as well. So without further ado, let's bring the man. His name is on the marquee. Follow him on X, John Morgan _MMA. What up, pal?
What's going on, man? Yeah, it's an interesting time. There was, this fight card this past weekend didn't have a lot of fanfare around it, but I actually had a pretty good time at the Apex, man. I thought there was some new names to pay attention to, some debuts I thought looked sharp. And then, it kind of leads into this weekend with Seattle where, great headliner for sure, but a card that's just had a lot of injuries, man. You feel for the matchmakers when this many fights are falling out, and they got to continually try to put the thing back together. So because of that, yeah, probably not as many fights to talk about as most people might like, but never any shortage of headlines, and you hit on a couple of them there for sure.
Yeah, well, this past weekend, I reffed a really good regional. There's a really good regional promotion. You have the CFFCs and the LFAs of the world, right? Which are really the two main pipelines, except some that are, overseas. And then you have that next tier of regional action, which the next tier I would put, the Tuff in there, and I would put some other regional promotions, and I'll put one that is a local one out here called Attitude MMA, and they have an affiliation with LFA as well. So there was a really good card this past weekend. Raheem Rambo Forrest headlined it, got a very dominant first round knockout victory. But the co-main event, and we touched on this off air, a 1-0 fighter named Ron Humphreys took on a 3-1 Paul the Wrecking Ball Kimball. I reffed pretty much all the big fights on the card, and I don't say this lightly. Ron Humphrey, who ended up literally running through Paul Kimball, who is just an outstanding fighter and can't get fights himself. A 1-0 Ron Humphreys runs through him, and I dare to say he is the most impressive fighter I have ever seen on a regional scene at 1-0.
That's amazing. That is high praise. And, anybody that's listened or watched this podcast understands that you have a sharp eye for talent and what you're looking at. So to come in and lay some praise like that, man, that is significant. So I look forward after we get done today to going and checking out that footage and heck, maybe, maybe try to get him on a CFFC card in the very near future. But you're spot on with that, man. And that's what I love about this game. Is like, you really need these organizations everywhere. And man, and I tell people all the time, if you've got one in your area, go check it out, man. If you're an MMA fan, go check out these local promotions. The ticket price is going to be significantly less than you would be paying to go to a UFC event. And, you're going to see all levels of competition, of course. You're going to see people that are just starting out that, won't end up ultimately chasing a career, but you're going to find these little diamonds in the rough as well. And it's so cool to kind of see these athletes when they're first starting out and to really be like, hey, man, I was there. It's like watching your favorite band. You're like, oh, man, I remember when I caught them in front of 12 people in a warehouse or whatever, Yeah, it's fun to do that. So high praise, man. I'm definitely looking forward to checking out his footage. And, maybe we can book this guy a fight.
I actually messaged a CFFC counterpart of ours, and I said, you need to get this guy on a show because he is going to skyrocket to this show. There's no doubt, barring an injury or a fluke, something, he will be in the show. Get him on CFFC now before it's too late. Ron Humphreys, check out that name. You could go back on the YouTube channel, the LFA Fight Network. It was a Attitude MMA card. It was the co-main event, and you can see this pretty face as a third man in the ring.
I love it. I'm going to go check it out. It's funny. I had a chance to, I guess, as long as we're talking about things we do over the weekend, I was actually on a Tuff-N-Uff call on UFC Fight Pass. A couple of nice prospects there as well. I'll just point out to anybody that didn't get a chance to. Well, first of all, it was kind of cool. Leon Shabazian. There was a whole scramble to the main event and the main card and all that. So Leon Shabazian and Arian Tavares got promoted to the main event, but Leon Shabazian got a victory in the new main event. And of course, his brother Edmund Shabazian fought the following night. But the emotion that Leon had was unbelievable. And man, it had been like 2 years since he had fought, and he had some setbacks. And so for the brothers to get the big wins was cool. But a couple prospects I'll point out too. Now a little further along in their career than Mr. Humphreys, with David McGoyan. He's the protege of Arman Sarukian. Arman was in his corner actually there in Las Vegas. It was pretty cool to see him. He had fought for CFFC before as well. Had kind of I wouldn't say a bad showing. I mean, he had a first-round knock, but he missed weight, and he kind of started to slow down a little bit, and you wondered, all right, is he all that he's cracked up to be? He definitely looks like the real deal. Turns out he was actually battling like some illness the first time around, which you didn't really know about, so he looked fantastic. And also, I always love these kind of the lineages of people, and Eduardo Pena, who is the son of Sergio Pena, who's one of the greatest grapplers of all time, and a respected coach these days. His son is kind of, I had some starts and stops with his career, I guess. I don't know if it was, due to injuries or due to him not being sure he wanted to chase it, but man, he came back, and I mean, as you would expect, the son of a grappling legend, man, his grappling is just off the charts. So fun card. You can catch the replay on UFC Fight Pass. That's what I was doing on Friday night, and then Saturday night at the Apex.
I really like Tuff-N-Uff because I was lucky enough. Justin gave me tickets to kind of like an all access ticket where I could just walk around, sit Cageside, and I was reffing an Apex card the next night, and then I realized I'm like, they are brilliant by running a tough card the night before, whether UFC or an Apex or an arena show or an Apex card, because now you can get this talent where they had like their coaches are fighting the next day, right? And so a team can come and you get all this high level talent in the crowd watching or cornering. It was awesome. When I was there, I was just standing by the cage, like, man, I'm 20 feet back. And I look to my left again, and I'm like, Joe Riggs, what's up, pal? And he was just sitting there because he was cornering somebody the next night at the Apex. So he came to the show, and I was just like, that's a very smart business strategy of running a show before a UFC card the next day.
It is. It's cool, man. It's an organization I've been working with ever since I moved to Las Vegas, man. I've been working with them for 16 years at this point. And for the longest time, they just did amateur shows. And now they do pro-am, and they're on UFC Fight Pass. But it's funny because, you always talk about like developmental of fighters, right? A developmental organization to help fighters kind of move up the ranks, whatever. But it's crazy. And I'm sure you noticed as well. You got guys like, you'll have referees like Mark Smith and Chris Tione who are reffing at the UFC level, who started at Tuff-N-Uff doing amateur fights there, and that's where they got their reps in to make it up to UFC level. Justin Bernard, who is, you see him doing Power Slap, you see him do Fight Pass Invitational, you see him doing some weigh-ins and stuff. He started there as well. Junichiro Kamijo. It's like, it's not just fighters. I mean, me, you know what I mean? Like I did a bunch of
me not
there.
Tough, but me on the attitudes and the summit fightings and the whatever, which then got me into the CFFC, which then got me up to the big, like it's funny how all these, you have this similar path of all these people.
It's this whole ecosystem, of everybody kind of growing together, man. So it is cool, man. It's always great to see the UFC execs in the crowd, and they're kind of eyeing the talent and seeing who's out there. So good show. If you're ever in town and you're in town for a UFC event, definitely recommend checking out a Tuff-N-Uff if you can.
All right, now I'm going to put this on you. Where do we want to start? Do we want to start UFC Seattle? There's not really, we could talk about anything, but I think really we just want to talk about the main event, and I want to talk about your interview for Grind City Media with Triple C Henry Cejudo. Do we want to start there? Do we want to start with Eric Nicksick and Sean Strickland? Do we want to start with Conor McGregor? I'll leave it to you. I'm prepared for all of them.
Well, let's I guess we got to go with the fight first. Let's talk about the fight with Henry Cejudo first, and then those other headlines we'll certainly get to as well, because I haven't talked much about the Eric Nicksick situation, so I'm kind of interested to get your take in that as well. I've seen a lot of takes out there, but I say we start with Henry Cejudo because, number one, I did think he was great in the interview, man. I thought he had an amazing interview, and this is a big fight in a big moment in his career, and that's the fight that's teed up for this Saturday. So let's start there with Henry Cejudo and Song Yadong.
I want to start with the interview, right? Because this was a real Henry Cejudo in this interview. And there's a lot of times you get this with his own podcast. You get his honest, unvetted opinions on stuff, and he doesn't have to play a character, which he does when he's in the main spotlight of, doing the press and the promo for a UFC event on fight week, or, a lot of, let's call it the UFC Uncuts and things of that nature. But your interview with him, it's like, and I even texted you, I said, I've always been a Henry Cejudo fan, but now I want to go have a beer with that guy.
Absolutely.
Because we talked about just like the differences of training and being a dad now and doing this, that, and the other. And, that's a soft spot for me. But it's also like I'm in it to make money right now. There's too much money on the table not to. I want to chase a championship, and I'm going to give you my real opinions. It's a lot harder now that I have kids, but I'm still driven by this ultimate competitor I have within me that I can't turn off. And I just thought, like, this is a real dude, man. And he's not this triple C persona and throwing snakes at people and doing all this cringe, the king of cringe stuff. He's just a real guy. And I think this is a whole different perspective. If the masses watch this interview, how could Henry Cejudo not be a baby face?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that, and I agree. That's kind of what I took after we got done as well. Is it was just a legitimate conversation, and unfortunately, I've known Henry Cejudo for a long time, and I've had conversations like this with him over the years. And you hit the nail on the head. He plays a character, and he'll admit it. You know what I mean? He's like, look, I'm trying to get people drummed up and interested and wanting to tune into my fights, and I put myself out there, and that's not easy, right? You put a target square on your back when you decide, hey, I'm going to be the king of cringe. And as you said, I'm going to bring props out here and I'm going to make myself look like a little bit of a goofball just because I want to get people talking about it, right? And that's what's so important about this game of mixed martial arts. And you got to fight, you got to get results, you got to get wins, but you got to get people interested in watching you compete, even if it's the fact that they hate you and they don't like you and they want to see you get your butt kicked. That's fine, as long as they're willing to tune in or as long as they're willing to pay the money for pay-per-view. That's what you got. But this was not that Henry Cejudo. And I can't tell you, we connected for the interview and he did say, hey, you're getting me first today. So you're getting me my best move when I'm just getting started and let's go. Let's have some fun. But I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you got a chance to watch and enjoy it. And yeah, I'll point other people to it, even if maybe you think you're not a Henry Cejudo fan, even if maybe you think like, I don't like this guy, I don't like the King of Cringe, go check it out because he is open and honest about the challenges and about his fight with Merab Dvalishvili and, all those things and about where he stands and where his career is going. I think you really get to see just Henry Cejudo, not the King of Cringe, not, the Triple C character.
Yeah, interesting to know that he was injured going into that fight, but he didn't use that as an excuse. He clearly stated in that interview, Merab is the best in the world. Like no ifs, ands, or buts. And so he wasn't like, oh, I need the other shot because this, that, and the other. It was more of like, I had this opportunity, I had to take it, even with an injury. But don't take that as an excuse because this dude's the best in the world, and he's. And I think I think it really is a testament to Cejudo when he was like, listen, I didn't take his win over O'Malley as him being clearly the best in the world, but what he did to Umar, like hands down, the guy's the best in the world. And I think you just getting that honest triple C about a competitor, looking at another competitor and being like, real recognizes real, and I'm recognizing it now, even though I may not have said it be the past, and I may not say it again. But in this completely, just raw interview, I'm gonna admit it.
Because look, they may cross paths again. You know what I mean? It's not out of the realm of possibility that they meet up again in the future. Now, things have to go right, and obviously it starts this Saturday against a very tough Song Yadong. But I agree, for him to say that, I was kind of surprised and impressed to hear that because I know it's not necessarily easy to do, especially, again, if you might cross paths them down the road and that person may be able to pull that out and be like, what, why are you even taking this fight? You already told me I'm the best in the world. You already admitted that I'm better than you. And so, man, it was cool to hear him say that. And it just goes to show you, nobody can deny Merab anymore. I mean, literally nobody can deny that guy, what he's done at this point. And I'm honestly a little bit surprised. I still see the rare opinion out there that I don't know, maybe the Umar fight was closer than it was, and et cetera. I don't know,
it was a very close fight, but he was, and you could argue the scorecards and the criteria and giving it this, but you can't argue that Merab dictated exactly what he wanted to do when he wanted to do it in the manner in which he was doing it by.
100%, man. So like to see the high praise, and I'm really interested to see. I mean, obviously we can break it down. We can talk about the styles and all that, but bottom line is, to me, the big thing that stands out is at some point you do get old, right? I mean, especially Henry Cejudo, what he's done in his career. We talked about, hey, I think I've had
miles.
A lot of miles, man. He said it. I think I've had more competitions than anybody, but maybe like Bo Nickel, and I mean, and that's true because he's got that extensive wrestling background. And I don't know if you know this, but he actually won an Olympic gold medal at one point. I don't know if he doesn't share that. Yeah, he doesn't share that publicly.
That may be
often.
One of the seeds.
Yeah, but I mean, look, to do that, I mean, I know the respect that you have for the wrestling game, and to be an Olympic gold medalist. I mean, it's a Division I national champion is incredible, right? I mean, obviously, two different styles of wrestling, but in any competition, a national competition is enough. But when you take international, and it's so hard, you got to be on that day. It's not over a season, it's not over a lengthy competition. It's like you got to be the man that day, and it's a 4-year cycle to build up. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Everything has to go right, and the dude is an elite competitor, but lot of miles, and as he said it, and you kind of touched on, a lot of miles, and now he's a father, and I loved how open he was about that too. About hey, man, I got family that I got to deal with, I got business interests that I got to deal with, right? Because that's the thing about this fight. And
when he said, "I'm training, and my kid is crying, and I gotta stop and go over there," like I'm just like, dude, that is as real and honest of an answer and transparency as you will get. And that's why, like, I was like, I just want to have a beer with this guy now. That was awesome interview. John, I've seen damn near all of your interviews. I'm going to go down and say, like, this was one of the realest, like, from an athlete's perspective. You did a great job of saying you have nothing to prove. Why? And him giving you asking the right questions and him giving you not the show answers, the real answers. I'm going to go down and say one of your best interviews you've ever done.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. I do appreciate that very much, and it helps when you got somebody that's accomplished as Henry Cejudo is, and as trusting. Like I said, I've known the guy for a lot of years, and so it's always cool when you know somebody that long and you know that, hey, I think that goes a long way, like, building relationships with people over time, because I think they know when I sit down to talk to John Morgan, he's not trying to trip me up on anything. He's not trying to get me on any gotcha, like, got you to say the quote that I needed for my social media headline. You know what I mean? And I hope that, I hope that's what I've been able to convey over my career is that, athletes know that, hey, if they sit down and talk to me, they could just be real. Like, let's just get into it.
Yeah, well, let's get into the fight because he's got a tall task ahead of him this weekend.
Ooh.
So this week, UFC Seattle, Henry Cejudo, the number 7 ranked fighter in the bantamweight weight class, takes on Song Yadong, number 8. Now, we look at everything apples to apples, and we're going to say, hey, Henry Cejudo, clearly the more accomplished fighter. And, he clearly has the more accolades. But have you seen the line on this fight? This is shocking to me. And I don't know if age is what it is or a lost confidence in Henry Cejudo, but have you seen the line?
Well, I would expect Song Yadong to be a favorite. I just don't know by how much.
Why would you expect, and that's where I'm going. Why would you expect Song Yadong to be the favorite? I mean, to me, if we're going off of, MMA math, I think even the MMA math doesn't make him a favorite. Well, I'm just curious why. And I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just an honest answer.
No, totally understand. No, the reason I would expect for him to be the favorite is just simply, and you touched on it, age, number one, right? I mean, Henry Cejudo at this point, 38 years old in the bantamweight division. I think it's not like we're talking about a 38-year-old heavyweight. If we were talking about 38-year-old heavyweight, you wouldn't have the same type of concerns. Right. Been a long time since he's had his hand raised, man. It really has. I mean, you're not talking about a lot of fights in that time. It's not like he's on a 7 or 8 fight losing streak. He had the layoffs. He was close to beating Aljamain Sterling, but he came up a little bit short and didn't. But, hasn't had his hand raised since 2020. I mean, that's a long time ago. Now it was against Dominic Cruz. And so, and obviously Dominic Cruz is a legend, but then you can extrapolate that and be like, well, Dominic isn't even around anymore. And so that's why. That's what I expect is simply because I would expect the public to favor the younger guy, the guy that you would assume that is probably on the way up. And then we always do talk about the public sentiment side, right? I do think there is a big portion of people that just aren't fans of Henry Cejudo, and so they want to bet against him, you know what I mean? So there's a little bit of that. But that's what I expect it to be. Now, not significantly, because as you said, the accomplishments, the level of competition, like who Henry Cejudo has faced, who he's beaten, it's levels above. So I wouldn't expect it to be big, but I would expect it to be minus 150, maybe minus 160, somewhere in there.
I hear what you're saying. It's very logical. I just disagree. All right. And I'm going to tell you why. When we look at Henry Cejudo against the top talent of the world, even as of late, he's ultra competitive. We take that at Song Yadong and look at him at the next tier of top talent in the world. He's ultra competitive and still taking a couple losses. Sanhagen, right? And his last fight was against Peter Yan, right? So I look at this and I hate using MMA math, but I'm gonna default to MMA math here, right? You have a razor tight fight against Aljamain Sterling when Aljamain Sterling was unstoppable. And then, it was 2 years ago now, a year and a half ago. Then he follows that up with going against Merab, and albeit Merab kind of in the later rounds really did what he wanted, Cejudo didn't make it easy for him. He was ultra competitive that whole fight. And let's go to round number 1 and round number 2. He was winning that fight in round 1 and round 2. He took down Merab Dvalishvili in round 1 with ease. Now, I don't know if that was Merab playing with him. Who knows? It could have been a lot of things. But I just look, if we're going to look apples to apples in our most recent there, do I think Song Yadong has more ways to win, which is usually a tell for me? Yeah, I think he's got a few more ways to win. But I think what Henry Cejudo ultra specializes in is still the last to go. If you can make this a grind it out over 5 rounds, and he can grind it, slow it down, press him against the cage, press him down, hold him down. I think it's the easiest path to victory. I think he has the easier path to victory in this fight than Song Yadong does. And that's why I'm leaning towards Henry Cejudo in here.
Wow, man. Yeah, you know what? And again, well, now to be fair, you did ask me what I thought the betting line would be at, not who I'm picking in the fight. But true. But you make some great points there. You really do, right? Because now we're and again, didn't use it as an excuse, but look, man, I had a torn groin, you know what I mean? And I shouldn't have taken that fight. It was a mistake. But again, but Merab's the best in the world, but you make some damn good points, because I'm thinking too, and I guess, so a couple things that were factored in my head, why I know this is going to be tough for Henry Cejudo. I mean, obviously, again, I think the speed and the power that Song Yadong brings to the table is significant, right? I mean, he can clip you, he can crack you, and he's younger and faster, and so that's going to be a problem. Now, Cejudo, not that he's bad in striking by any stretch of the imagination, so, but that scares me a little bit. And, Song Yadong has been working with Team Alpha Male. You think, I mean, has he been able to improve his wrestling to the level of Henry Cejudo's? Probably not. Cejudo's one of the most accomplished wrestlers in the history of mixed martial arts, but at least it's a good camp. If it was a situation where Song Yadong was training somewhere and he's like, hey, I don't really worry about my grappling too much. My striking is so good. I don't think we're going to that realm. But he's been in there just grinding with those guys on a daily basis. So this is a very tough assignment for Henry Cejudo. But you are right. It's not that it's an unwinnable fight. It's not that it's, oh my gosh, I can't believe this matchup they put together. How is this even competitive? It's not. And you are exactly right when you talk about the pedigree. I start going and looking through, when the victories and the names. Again, like you said, you can't do MMA math. You can only compete against the names that are in front of you, right? But if you're looking for signature victories as of late for Song Yadong, you're talking about Chris Gutierrez, Ricky Simon, Marlon Moraes, Julio Arce, Casey Kenny. I mean, all those guys are good. Like they're all fun. Like every name I just mentioned there, when they're fighting, I want to watch them fight because they're exciting and they're fun and they're tough. But it's not on the level of what Henry Cejudo. I mean, even Dominic Cruz, okay, but we're talking about 2020 Dominic Cruz. And yes, I know that he's had his issues, but I mean, Marlon Moraes, TJ Dillashaw, Demetrius Johnson, Sergio Pettis. I mean, you're right. And then you're talking about narrow losses to Aljamain Sterling and Merab Dvalishvili, who are absolutely, two of the best in the game right now. So you make a compelling case, man. You really do make a compelling case. I think it's just Cejudo can't make any mistakes, right? That's the biggest key. Like he has to execute at all times because.
And he said that in the interview. He has to stay high and tight. He has to be ultra disciplined and then get to a spot when he sees the opening. Which, he was very transparent in that interview about where his path to victory was. But I take that as that narrow lane that he has to drive. Like a lot of people are going to take that and going to say, well, that's one of the reasons he's the underdog. And that's the reason I'm picking against him. I'm actually with a normal person. I'd be like, yeah, 100%. I agree with that. But not with a triple C, not with a 2-division world champion and an Olympic gold medalist. You don't get that way without having one of the highest freaking fight IQs in the game.
Yeah. And he is, right? I mean, when you hear him break down fights, when you hear him give analysis, man, I love it. Cause he is an incredible fight IQ. The knowledge that he brings is unbelievable. And just the discipline and the determination, you know what I mean? Like what he's accomplished throughout his career. And I love the fact that he's like, got a little chip on my shoulder. You know what I mean? Like, hey, got my back against the wall. And I like that. I want to have that. You know what I mean? And so, I
don't think Henry Cejudo is going to go in there he can be as physically prepared as he wants. But that is only half the battle with a competitor like him. He is going to be so mentally prepared and mentally. What do we sing John Jones's praises literally the most about? Is his IQ of his opponent and knowing what his opponent's going to do and this film work that he does and how studied up he is. By his interview with you, it showed me he knows that about Song Yadong already. He knows that path. And that's why I'm just saying, if you get a guy as accomplished as him who still has, some gas left in the tank that I believe he still does, with that IQ, he's not going to go in there reckless and he's not going to take chances he doesn't need to take. He's going to be all the way out when he needs to be all the way out, and he's going to be all the way in when he needs to be all the way in. And so Song Yadong chances, he's got to catch him in those transitions. And I think against just a normal former world champion, that would be an easier path than it is a guy with the IQ that Henry Cejudo has. And that's for no other reason. That is why I'm taking Henry Cejudo in this.
I love it, man. You make a great case, and I think you may have convinced me. I mean, in my heart, I was always going to be pulling for Henry Cejudo just because I do like the guy. I mean, I think you can see from the conversation, like, had a good relationship with him for a long time. But I worried. But I do. Anybody, some of my favorite guys, Andre Arlovsky, Donald Cerrone, like every time they got in there, I was like, oh God, I'm worried. I'm worried because you're worried for the guys you like, you know what I mean? And I do worry that this is a strong, powerful, fast, explosive striker that he's going to have to deal with, but you make a great case why he's got every capability necessary. And man, and the other thing I think I worried about when they first announced this matchup, I think I kind of addressed in the interview as well, is like, where's your head at when they don't give you another fellow legend? You know what I mean? Like, those are the matchups I'm sure that would motivate you the most, is if you have these legendary names. And I love the fact that he addressed it and was like, well, yeah, at first I was a little bit disappointed, but now, like, I get it. I understand the vision. I understand what I have to do. And man, if he can go out there and execute, I mean, it changes it up of adding, not that he's not right there. As you say, he's a top 10 ranked athlete, but for Cejudo to get a big win like this and prove like, hey, me talking about I'm still in the mix is not me just saying things. Like, I just went out there and beat a fellow top 10 guy, a guy that's a decade plus younger than me. I need to be in all these conversations about the biggest fights in the division. So it's a big one this weekend. It really is.
Yeah, off of a few-year layoff, he then comes back and fights Aljamain Sterling and then Merab Dvalishvili. And truth be told, he was utterly respectable in both of them. And arguably could have won one of them.
Absolutely, man. It really
so
is.
when and this is no disrespect to Song Yadong, he is a bright talent in this game. He is a fun fighter to watch. He's the fighter's fighter. You know what I mean? But I don't think I'm going out on a limb here, and I'm saying he's not Merab and he's not Aljo, and so I think just with what Henry has done, especially his last two fights, and how good I still think he looked in those fights, that this is like a complete reset for him. And he's like, all right, a lot more of the pressure is off. I'm not headlining the pay-per-view. I'm not the main event of a world title fight pay-per-view. And I got this young upstart. And you know what? The old line is gonna drag you down into the deep water, and I'm gonna drown you. I just think that's his mindset. I think that's what he's capable of doing. Whether he does it or not, remains to be seen Saturday night. But I think he's ultra capable of it.
Absolutely.
And I don't think 228 is representative of that. Minus 228.
Right. Yes. Yeah. We never even talked about where the line actually set at. I was way off. I said 150, 160 minus 228. That's it. That one does surprise me. And this almost feels like a situation where you're like, man, I can get Henry Cejudo as a dog. Like, how often are you going to have that in your career against anybody? You know, there's certain names. I think if you can get them at dog money, you just take them regardless of the matchup, because you're getting plus money on somebody of that caliber and that skill. So I'm excited for it, man. I'm this card took a lot of hits, man. This card took a lot of hits. So I know a lot of people are like, because I mean, dude, look at who was supposed to be on here, man. I mean, Dominic Cruz and Rob Font were supposed to be on here. Edson Barbosa, Steve Garcia would have been a lot of fun. That one got lost as well. You just lost Ketlin Vieira, Macy Chasson, which is meaningful to it. So it took a lot of hits, but I think it's still going to be a good night, and I think it's still going to be a fun card. And I'm actually, it's going to be a fun day for me. I'll be out for the final CFFC Match Day event of the year. It's Iowa State and Missouri in the morning for me. So I'll be out on the campus of Columbia, Missouri for that. Keegan O'Toole is back. He's returning. He's been out for a couple months. He's going to be looking for his 100th career win in the NCAAs, which would be cool, in his final home meet. So anyway, I'm on the mic for that, and I jumped straight on a plane. And I did a similar thing the other week with the pay-per-view. It's kind of nice to just sit on a plane and pull up the computer and, like, I don't care how long I'm sitting here. As long as I got power and internet, man, I can watch the fights. Like, man, we can be delayed. We can be circling in the air. I'm good.
Just have those beverages coming. Just have those beverages in rotation.
Keep the beverages coming, and I'll sit here and watch the fights, man. So I'm looking forward to it. I think it's a big opportunity for Henry Cejudo. And yeah, man, I'm glad you enjoyed the interview. It was great to talk to him.
We're not even talking about the opportunity it is for Song Yadong. It is a monster opportunity for him.
Big time. Yeah, and this will be delivered, because you touched on it. I mean, he's had a couple of these opportunities, right? He did have a fight with Peter Yan. He did have a fight with Corey Sandhagen that were kind of, those were his opportunities previously to show that, hey, I'm not just, because he's clearly talented. I mean, he's clearly skilled, but, is he elite? And he had two opportunities previously to show that I'm elite. And he came up a little bit short, but I mean, still a young guy, a guy that what is he, 27 and already has 30 professional fights. I mean, he's been doing this for a long time. He's learning English in recent times, which is just always helps with marketability, right? Because you can do the interviews, you can relate to the audience a little bit. So that's been kind of cool. So yeah, huge opportunity for him to put a big name on his resume and to do it in a main event. Big opportunity for him as well.
Saturday night, it's going down, Seattle, Washington. But now let's get to some juicier news. All right. We'll start with Sean Strickland.
All right.
Loved, hated Sean Strickland. I don't think people feel either. It's one or the other. He's
polarizing. He's absolutely polarizing, right? Like, nobody's in the middle on Sean Strickland.
That is absolutely correct. Eric Nicksick came out on a podcast this past week, and a little bit of some lightning rod comments. I think off the record, there's no issue there. On the record, potential issue. Sean Strickland has taken some issue. Says they're still friends, but let me recap. And I'm paraphrasing that. Nicksick was bothered with Strickland's lack of urgency being down in the fight. And then he publicly stated that he wants Sean Strickland to reevaluate what he wants to do in this sport, and that he only wants to coach and corner world champions. You can I don't necessarily know if I have problems with what was said. It's what the reading between the lines could implicate there. What's your take on all this?
It's interesting, right? Because Eric Nicksick, based here in Las Vegas, man, so spend a lot of time around the guy. He's one of the coolest, nicest dudes you'll ever meet. And I think one of his big strengths as a coach is motivation. You know, he didn't come from a mixed martial arts background. He came from a football background. And so, you know, that rah, you know, win one for the Gipper out there. You know, like, he's good at that. And you see it in the corner. And that's one of the things I love about him in the corner is the connection that he has with his athletes and the obvious care that he has for his athletes. So when they said this, at first I was like, whoa, that sounds like maybe something that could have been said behind the scenes. Because I totally get it, right? Like, it's like, hey, why are you doing this? Like, as something that you say to your athlete, like, why are you doing this? Are you doing this because you want to be the best in the world? Or are you doing this simply because you're just going out there and going through the motions to collect a paycheck? You know, you want to kind of like snap them out of it a little bit and get them focused in it. And Eric is that guy. He is a key motivator. You just wonder, is that something that should have been said in private? But knowing Eric the way I do, I can't believe it just doesn't seem like an uncalculated decision on his part to air these things out in public, to say these things on a public forum. And I almost feel like maybe it's like, hey, I've had this conversation with him behind the scenes and it's not really registering. Maybe if I say it out loud and he sees it in a public forum and everybody's talking about it, maybe that'll get through to him. Because I don't think that Sean is probably always the easiest guy to get things through to. You know what I mean? He kind of just
don't say.
You know what I mean? Like, I think he kind of makes his mind and makes his decision. And so I kind of wonder, again, I think Eric knows his athletes incredibly well, is passionate about the people that he's there with. You see the motivation that you have. You see the care and concern. So this, on the surface, to me, seemed a little bit out of character, which made me think, hey, maybe this was a conscious decision that I believe by laying these things out in this forum, it'll maybe force Sean to address things that we haven't been able to get through to him behind the scenes. That's my supposition anyway.
Yeah, mine is I have no idea. Like, it took me. I watched the clips and I didn't listen to the whole podcast. So, and I'm pretty sure most people didn't that read these headlines.
Of course not.
So was there a lot more context beforehand and or afterwards? I really don't know. But to Sean Strickland, it didn't matter. Right. And again, I'm going to paraphrase, but essentially what Sean Strickland has then come out and said is he just won't corner me. He's still going to be my friend. I'm not going to have him corner me anymore. If that's the way he feels, he's not cornering me. And he should not have said it there. I think for the polarizing figure that is Sean Strickland, if he was hurt by this, which I think any rational person could and would be hurt by this, for him not to fire back, I just shows that the respect that he does have for Nicksick, number one, and number two, maybe the emotional immaturity growth that Sean Strickland has. You know what I mean? Because he says, listen, I'm not going to ruin my friendship with the guy over this, but he's not cornering me anymore.
And that's totally fair, right? You know what I mean? Like, and maybe they had already kind of come to that decision anyway. Maybe this was kind of a parting shot or something. I don't know. Again, it is interesting. And there's an incredible coaching staff at Xtreme Couture. I mean, Eric Nicksick is the most public, visible figure of it. You know, he's the one that's out there doing the interviews. He's the one that is usually on the countdown episodes and that sort of thing. But he's not the only one in the gym, and he'll be the first to tell you that as well. There's a number of incredible coaches over there at Xtreme Couture that could all handle Sean very well in the future moving forward. So I don't think it'll be a negative impact. You do hope that, you know, maybe if it did cause a rift, that, you know, everybody can get together and work it out behind the scenes, because that is a gym that is in a great place right now. Xtreme Couture is in a great place, but they've had some tumultuous history. I mean, I've been here in Vegas for a long time, and I've seen some kind of rifts happen among the staff at that gym, and everybody there will be happy to tell you about the history. You know, I mean, they're just got some feelings hurt, some emotions involved, and it caused problems with the team for a long time. And I think those days they've moved well past it, and that gym's in such a great place right now. So you hope that they're able to truly say, hey, really no hard feelings. Let's work this out behind the scenes. So it just, the whole thing it did seem out of character. It seemed a little bit out of place. And like you, I'll admit, I didn't watch the whole interview either. And so I almost feel guilty sometimes commenting on something if I didn't watch the whole thing. But you're 100% right. Most people that saw the quotes and that were reacting to the quotes didn't see the whole interview. You know, Sean Strickland didn't see the whole interview. He didn't go back and watch it all. So the quotes are what they are. I have a lot of respect for Eric Nicksick as well. And I think, you know, when I think about him, I think about just a master motivator. And so I wonder if this was done it's kind of like, you know, when there's press conferences and Dana White will say something and you it almost seems like, where's that coming from? That seems a little bit out of left field. There's a reason behind it. Like there's a reason he planted that seed somewhere. There's a reason he'll talk about an athlete, an executive, an organization, whatever it is. There's a logic behind why he dropped something into a conversation. And I feel like Eric Nicksick is very much like that as well. And so because of that, I wonder, you know, and again, everybody gets frustrated. Everybody does sometimes, you know, as much as they try to, maybe it was just a moment of pure honesty where he's frustrated and it wasn't a motivational reason, but I do wonder if there was something behind it.
Now, Daniel Cormier even chipped in. Did you see this or chimed in? Did you see this?
No, I don't think I did. What did he say?
So Daniel Cormier, it was I read it on Junkie the other day, and he basically says something to the effect of, listen, I don't disagree with what Nicksick said about Sean's performance and why he was frustrated with it. But the point that he disagrees with is I only want to coach world champions. And so to Daniel Cormier's, what Daniel Cormier is basically paraphrasing again, is he comes out and says, I just disagree with that. So what, you don't want a guy who busted his butt, got to the UFC and, you know, like most UFC fighters, you know, go 1-3 and then are cut, or 0-2 and are cut? Like, that's a little bit insulting. Do I think that's what he meant? No, that's what Daniel Cormier said. But what I would think that Nicksick meant was, I only want people who are aspiring to be a world champion, that
Spot
have
on.
the drive to be a world champion.
Spot on,
that's
100%.
what he was kind of questioning, in my opinion. That's what he was ultimately questioning with Sean Strickland.
Yeah, I 100%. I think that is spot on. If you read it just for the words, just the text, I don't think you'll get the full meaning. I think exactly what you said, because I have seen Eric cornering here in Tuff-N-Uff, here in local promotions, and he's no less passionate about those guys than he is when he is at a championship level. So yeah, I think if you read it word for word and you think that Eric is saying, I'm only interested in coaching you if you're world champion. Now, and I will say this too, you think about the sacrifice that it takes, man, that, you know, we always talk about the sacrifice that athletes have to have, man. It's unbelievable, right? I mean, to be performing at a high level of the sport, but the coaches, they spend a hell of a lot of time away from home, man. You know, I think about back in the day, you know, Greg Jackson. And man, I would see, back when I was going to 35, 40 events a year, I would see that dude in the airport every morning afterwards too. And I'm like, that guy's gone all the time too. I remember it was when the uniform first got kind of added. I'm like, how many uniform shirts must you have of all your athletes? And you're gone. You're away from your wife. You're away from your family. You know, I know Eric has a kid and you know, has a family, and, you know, you spend your whole time away from that, and you don't want to be. That may sound selfish, be like, I don't want to be here if you're not trying to give your best. Why am I giving my best and spending my time away from my family if you're not here to give your best, if you're just going through the motions? So, and I think it's a very real thing as well. Now, you know, obviously you can come back and say, well, it's not like you're doing it for free. You know, I am paying you for this. It is your job. And that is 100% true. But I'm just saying, let's talk about the real side of the human aspect of it. Like, dude, granted, you're paying me to be here, and it is my job, but I am away from my family as well a lot of the time, and I want to know that we're all giving ourselves 100% together. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I hope that there's not major rift there, because I see an Eric. Now, listen, I've never met either of the guys, right?
Right.
I don't know them personally. But from afar, it looks like a Sean Strickland needs a guy like Nicksick. Like, that's a guy he needs, you know, just to be around, like, to kind of keep him level. Do you see that as well?
100%. Oh, 100%, man. And you know, Sean has those ups and downs. I feel like this is like the perfect home for him. I mean, he used to have the reputation of just being hard to deal with in a gym. You know what I mean? Look at the relationship him and Chris Curtis have had, you know, from like best friend to like, I hate you, to like, we're fighting each other, to like, now we're best friends again. But yeah, I think he definitely needs that. I mean, I think Sean needs some guidance and some, you know, just somebody to confide in, you know what I mean? He's he's been through some stuff in life, and he openly admits it. And I think, Eric was probably a bit of a father figure to him, you know what I mean? And at least a bit of a rallying point for him. So hopefully they can work it out, man. I feel good that they can, man. I don't think they'll let it fester up. Again, there have been some times where emotions in that gym have festered up. This is years and years ago. This is a long time ago, but I hope they'll address it. And there's so much going on. I mean, they can move through it pretty quickly. So we'll see. It's worth paying attention to.
Fight game. I can't tell you. I mean, you're so intimately involved in the sport. So am I. I can't tell you how many times I've seen a coach getting into a fighter after a fight, or a fighter getting into it with a coach or laying it out. Like, the emotion in this game, like it's like nothing you can imagine. I watched this past weekend a fighter in the cage, like, just start hammering, like yelling at the promoter. He's like, and it was really like, you told me I was fight 7 or 4 and I was really fight 7. I warmed up and I cooled down. It's like, and I warmed up again and not saying like, but this is where I'm going with it. I'm saying a lot of words, but the emotion in which he had, and that he directed all of that at somebody, right? And he directed it all. And he's like, I'm not saying that's why I lost. It just threw me off mentally and blah, 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 blah. And then they were hugging in the back 30 minutes later, right? This game is just an emotional game. And I think it's really hard for people outside of the ecosystem to understand that everybody involved is sociopathic to a degree.
100%.
You know what I mean? So this is the stuff you're going to get.
It is legitimately, and it's a cliche at this point, but it is the absolute truth. It is the highest of highs and it is the lowest of lows. Like, it is unlike any other sport that's out there. And I almost hate sometimes when you hear people, whether it be media or analysts or whatever, like, treat it like it's just a regular sport. Like, it's not, man. It's just absolutely not. You don't get to go out there and, you don't take a loss and then, we'll just go out and have dinner with my teammates and then we'll run it back in 3 days and we'll get back in there. You know what I mean? Like, no, it is heartbreaking in defeat, and it is an exhilaration like none other in victory, man. It is crazy. It is such an emotional game, and then you end up feeling like everybody's against you, and you start looking for all these things. So it's tough, man. It really is a tough sport, man. You and I both love it. Absolutely. I feel honored to be some small role in the sport, but man, you have to realize like what everybody in it is going through, man. It's tough.
So that was a long way of us saying what you're seeing playing out right now between them happens every day in every gym across the country. This is just what happens in this sport. Now let's
Hey, and you know what? I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up cornering him again in the future anyway, man. I wouldn't be shocked if they end up having a little talk and Sean's like, you know what, man? You're right. I do want to be world champion again. Tell me what I need to do to be there. And Eric's like, all right, let's go. Let's ride. You know what I mean? Burn the boats. Let's go.
Amen. Burn the boats. I love it's one of my favorite phrases of all time. All right, let's talk guy who's burned a lot of boats in his day.
What a transition.
And burned a lot of bridges. Yeah. Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor now has equity stake, aka part owner in BKFC. In a BKFC press conference, made tons of headlines. Some I believe, some I don't believe. One that he comes out where I just find this hard to believe is that Fedor is going to come and fight in bare knuckle. That he kind of laid out, Fedor, come on, and he basically said, look for some big announcements. And that one, I find that hard to believe. What I don't find hard to believe is that he will fight in bare knuckle. He even said he'll do it for free. I think it's, and he even gave some names. So there's a couple ways that we need to attack this. He's still under contract with the UFC. So one, he can't.
Right.
But he also has he's also had some like legal issues that have, for lack of a better term, canceled him to a degree. And would the UFC just be willing to, wash their hands of him, which would allow him to fight in a BKC? And he even threw some names out, and I'm getting ahead of ourselves in the conversation, but he threw out Mike Perry. I'd watch that. Jeremy Stevens, I'd certainly watch that. And he threw out Eddie Alvarez. I don't know if I really want to see that, but Mike Perry and Jeremy Stevens, absolutely. So let's start from number one. Do you think he's sincere that he believes and he wants to fight in BKFC? Number two, is there any way he could get out of his UFC contract? Is there a lapse clause in it? If you haven't fought in so long, you're automatically terminated. You know, I'm sure UFC holds all the cards there. So enlighten me and us.
So first off, I 100% believe that he wants to compete in BKFC and would absolutely do it as long as he's allowed to do so. Like, I think that he has enjoyed, obviously, being part owner in an organization. They have immediately made him the face, wisely so. There is no bigger star in combat sports. Everything he says gets attention and gets headlines. But as far as do I believe he would actually get in there and compete, 100% he would do it. We've talked about it over the years. Ben Rothwell, Mike Perry, these guys that have made the transition, a lot of them will say, like, honestly, like, yeah, this is a tough sport. So it's a rough sport. You get cut, you get beat up, but it's way easier to train for, man, because you're not putting your body through those grinding, grappling rounds. And that's where, the training and the grappling is where the injuries happen on your knees and your back and everything else. And so Conor McGregor would absolutely go out and throw hands with no gloves on any day. Now, that begs the immediate question, can he? And I would say right now, absolutely not. There's no way the UFC is going to sign off on him competing for BKFC. Now, I don't think that they necessarily view them as direct competition, but anytime you add a Conor McGregor fight to the mix, whatever organization that is now direct competition, because Conor McGregor, for better or worse, is still the biggest star in combat sports. He moves the needle like no other. Are there people that absolutely despise him? Yes, there are, but he still moves the needle like no other. And I don't think they're going to allow to do that. Now, you bring up something interesting, right? As you said, the reputation has not been fantastic for Conor McGregor as of late. Now, he vehemently denies the allegations and charges and findings that have been made against him, but they're still there. But could it get to a point where the UFC is like, man, you know what? We're just not dealing with the headaches anymore. Let him be somebody else's problem. That's interesting. But man, as a business, I just don't know that you do it. You know what I mean? Dana White has gone from, yes, Conor will fight in 2025 to I'm not sure when Conor's coming back. I mean, you can see the tone has changed, that perhaps there have been some discussions that they felt were going to be fruitful, and now they don't seem to be as fruitful, because now when Dana's asked about it, the tone is completely different. It's almost like, man, stop asking me. We'll just update you when there is. And it's not even a discussion point. But I don't think that they just let him go. I think the fact that, they understand that the type of financial impact he has, the type of cultural impact and meaning that he has, I think he'd have to do something absolutely heinous. I mean, the accusations are, but it's a weird spot, man. But I think if you're really, operating as just like, well, we want to keep our moral, reputation as spotless as possible. Yeah, let's just let him go down. But man, it's
and
more
this is MMA.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, it's a business, and so I have my doubts that they will ever. And as long as they're offering him fights, my understanding is his contract doesn't have a final termination date, a la the way Francis Ngannou's did, where it's like, as long as I get to this date, I'm good, and they can't go after me. And I don't think he has that in his contract, from everything I've ever been told. Obviously, I haven't inspected the document myself. But so that means as long as they're offering him fights and they're not defaulting, then I think they kind of hang on to his rights in perpetuity. And I just don't see them letting him go to compete in BKFC. Now, maybe if BKFC came together and said we're doing a co-promotion, but I don't know that the UFC is worried about that. You know what I mean? I'm just thinking like a one-off a la the Floyd Mayweather thing, but that was such a unique situation. Like, I mean,
and now
Conor
Floyd
McGregor,
Mayweather.
That's what I'm saying. It was such a unique situation. Like, this isn't even close to. I know BKFC is making waves, and I'm not trying to put down what they're accomplishing and their rise and all that. But we're talking about Floyd Mayweather, one of the biggest combat sports icons of all time. So I don't think we're in that type of situation. So I got to be honest. I think the will is there, the desire is there, and he would absolutely do it. I just don't know if there legally is a contractual way for him to get this fight that he wants.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it and I echo your sentiments here. Do I think the desire to just compete is there? Kinda.
Well, I think I think he could find himself. I think if Conor McGregor could find himself in a Dan Ige situation where it's like, hey, do you want to fight in 3 hours? Like, 100%.
That is exactly where I was going with him. When he's juiced up at a press conference with all the energy there, he's like, hell yeah, I'm going to fight. Hell yeah, right? But then, he gets home. He's got 3 kids running around. He's got a wife. He's got a home life that may have been imbalanced a little bit with everything. And, and then he's dealing with legal issues. He just got, another allegedly, or not allegedly, it was on camera, spit in somebody's face. There's a lot that takes you away from that. And so that's why I'm saying, is the desire there? Yeah, the desire is there in the moment, but would the desire be there for 3-4 months out to get there?
To put in a full training camp and to put everything else on hold. I mean, we started today talking about, Henry Cejudo's honesty of, having the kids and having the business interest. And it seems to me like, the business interests that Conor McGregor has are like 10x what Henry Cejudo is dealing with, because everybody wants a piece of Conor McGregor, right? Like everybody wants a piece of that and to strap onto that rocket ship. You know what I mean? So, I imagine when you got the type of money that he does, you hear about from professional athletes all the time, right? The amount of people that just come like, hey, man, invest in this. I got this opportunity for you. Let me show you this. The number of people that are like, man, if I could just get this in front of Conor McGregor, it would change everything for me. You know what I mean? Like you hear those stories out there. So I think it would be very, very difficult for him to put on full training camp. But yeah, when he's, when he does arrive to the press conference, albeit 2 hours late, and he starts talking about things like if they were like, hey, can we go tonight? I guarantee you he would go that night. Whatever he's weighing right then, like that's what we're fighting at. Let's go. He absolutely would. I don't want to make this comparison like to, I think about when Chael Sonnen was at his high point, right, in his career. And of course, I was working for MMA Junkie at the time, and we're looking for clicks and we're looking for traffic and all that. And Chael would say things, and you knew damn well there was no truth to him. You know what I mean? But like you still wrote about him and you still talked about it, and you still would, ask the follow-up to Dana White. And to be honest, I got to a point where I was like, this is silly. Like, why are we writing about stuff that we know there's absolutely no truth to? And so it's tough because, again, I don't want to say that Conor's saying there's no truth to, but when he's like, I'm absolutely going to fight for BKFC, I don't think you can take that as a guarantee and be like, well, Conor said it. He's absolutely going to fight for BKFC. I don't think you can take that as a guarantee. Is there a possibility it happens somehow, some way? Yes. I mean, if he's 45 years old, is the UFC going to be interested in his services anymore? And maybe at that point, they're like, yeah, dude, go do whatever you want. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I would think so. But I'm not ready to say that I feel wholeheartedly we will see him in a BKFC ring.
This is a 2-part question. Well, let's just go with number 1.
All right.
Do we ever see Conor fight again? Give me an over-under. 50,
bro,
50, 60, 40?
I used to be the 100% yes guy for years. And I'm starting to slide off a little bit, man. I still say over 50-50 because I believe the desire is there. And because I know his desire is there, and because I know the type of financial impact he has on the UFC and any other organization, like, yes, I believe I'll go 75-25. But understand I'm saying 75-25 as a guy that used to be 100 versus 0. And even it's starting to slip in my mind a little bit.
Okay. Part 2 to that question. Purely hypothetical. If he were to fight in BKFC today, and the 3 names that he dropped in there, Mike Perry, Jeremy Stevens, or Eddie Alvarez, I think we can both throw Eddie Alvarez off to the side. Eddie Alvarez seems like, to his own account, he's 1 foot out the door.
Yep.
Mike Perry, Jeremy Stevens. Who would you rather see him fight?
So, man, it's tough, right? Because with Mike Perry, is the face of BKFC, at least in terms of competition, right? Conor is now that face at the dais, but in terms of, who's the biggest star in the sport, it's Mike Perry. So you take the biggest star and you put the biggest star and you put them together, and that works, right? But the history with Jeremy Stevens,
right?
I mean, the history with Jeremy Stevens, like, I really,
who is that guy?
I'm telling you right now, when he won the other night and I was watching it, and Conor's in the ring, I really wanted him to turn to Conor and be like, I bet you know who I am now. You know what I mean? Or something like that, just to stir the interest. So, Man, and Jeremy Stevens, man, I love the attention and the respect that he's getting because that dude's a dog, right? I mean, a veteran dog of the sport. So to see him getting a little bit of love and some big paychecks at the end is awesome. So selfishly, I mean, honestly, I don't think you can go wrong either way. If I'm booking it and I'm trying to, it's my organization and I'm trying to make the most money possible, I'd probably say Mike Perry just because it's star A and star B. But I got to say, man, that history with Jeremy Stevens, like you got back. Now, here's the problem. I would say that the UFC wouldn't give you any of that footage because I don't think they would, especially if they had any interest in it. But there were so many media outlets because it boils down to that press conference. And there were so many media outlets that have footage of it that you could pay for that, like, it wasn't like it was backstage footage that only the UFC has. And out of spite, they're not going to give it to you to promote. Like, they're not going to do that. But there's so many outlets. There's so many ways to get the footage. Like, you could use the footage of that to help build it up. So the backstory with that would make it awfully tasty.
I think the smack talk leading up to a Mike Perry Conor McGregor fight would be epic. I would love to see that, and then have a opponent change day of and throw Jeremy Stevens in there. Like if I was fantasy booking that, I just think Mike Perry fights too ugly for a guy like Conor McGregor. Like, I don't think it would be the most exciting fight, but I think Jeremy Stevens would sit in that pocket with him and they would trade blow for blow. And I would love to see that. So I think the better visual fight for us fans would be Jeremy Stevens, but the buildup with Mike Perry, who knows what would happen.
I love it. You're going full on WWE booking, right? Where you get to control every aspect of 100%.
it. That's purely hypothetical.
I love it. It is actually brilliant, though. I mean, obviously that is not something I had considered in my putting my answer together. But you're absolutely right. If you could do that, like, let's just get all the hype from them two, but then let's have the fight from those two. That'd be pretty funny, to be honest with you.
Well, UFC Seattle is this weekend. Triple C. The much respected Triple C, in our opinion, a great interview, is headlining that card against Song Yadong, who comes in as the big favorite. I am surprised. You're not surprised he's the favorite. I am, but you are surprised that Song Yadong is that big of a favorite. Yep. But hey, listen, I am not batting. My batting percentage is down as of late with my picks in the UFC. So where I've been leaning. So who knows? I could have just tons of egg on my face, or I could redeem myself.
Or you could be 100% right.
Yeah. What was it like? Never mind. I'm not even gonna try and do the phrase. What was the anchor man? It works 60% of the time, all the time, or something like that.
There you go. Something like that.
There we go. That's me. But anyways, what do you got going on this weekend? I know your CFFC match day, last one this weekend. Anything else?
Yeah, CFFC Match Day. So check that out on Fight Pass. It's our final match day duel of the year. So last chance to catch him live, college wrestling, and maybe a big moment with Keegan O'Toole. His home return. He's looking for his 100th win. So that'll be fun. And then, flying back and watching the fights on the airplane. So it'll be a good weekend for me. That's all I got. I will say, if you haven't been checking out Dark Side of the Cage on the Vice Network, which I didn't even know I had, I will say I got to see a screen. So I don't know if you checked out last week was the Rise of Pride. And then I got to see a screener this weekend. The debut Wednesday night is going to be the Fall of Pride. And I just thought they were great. And if people haven't checked it out, the Rise of Pride was awesome because it had like Hicks and Gracie interview, and they're talking about the old Jim Storm days and all that. And they'll talk very much in the one that debuts this week about kind of, the organized crime stuff that was going on behind the scenes, and some very open and honest conversations about Pride. And I just thought that was a great trip down memory lane. So I'll just give a plug for that if people aren't checking it out. It's got some it's been some fun episodes, and these two paired together I think some of my favorites so far.
The Diaz episode was amazing.
That was incredible. Really, really
gives you a little deeper understanding about Nick Diaz. It really does.
It really
some of the tragedies in his life, and and then of course Joe Riggs's cameo in there. It's got great. You had to tell that story.
Amazing. The famous hospital fight. So definitely check it out. Like, I'll be honest with you, until this series, I didn't know I had the Vice Network, but I do. Like, I'd seen all the Dark Side of the Ring, but I think I'd always watch like replays on Hulu or something like that. So I didn't know if I had this, but my DirecTV stream package has Vice channel. So anyway, I'll just throw it out as a recommendation. I think they've been really good, man. I've enjoyed them. And it's funny in the beginning, like, I was like, man, I wish I could get more, but I forget that like I've lived through all this. Like I mean, intimately reported on these things. And so this is a great way if maybe you're new to the sport. And it was somebody, and the explanation is so spot on. If somebody wasn't around, how would you ever, educate them on this and let them know the history of it? And I was like, yeah, you're spot on. It's all right. But this one, because I think the rise and fall of Pride happened at a time like before really the internet had exploded the way that it has, and it's so much information was readily available. And of course, it was unfolding over in Japan. So to me, I felt like there was, a lot of more kind of even new stuff that even if you're a hardcore and you were hardcore around then, that you didn't know, or it was new information. So I really like this 2-pack of episodes.
Well, that's awesome. So, anyways, for John Morgan, I'm Eric McMahon. Enjoy the fights.